Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. I never thought that I'd be one of those people posting a story online, but I've had this story weighing on my chest for a year now, and with the anniversary of the encounter coming up, I felt like I needed to share it. This happened last Thanksgiving, and even though everyone tells me that I'm reading too much into it, I can't shake the feeling that I dodged something truly awful. My family wasn't doing a big gathering last year. Plans changed and a lot of family couldn't make it. My sister had moved out of town and my mom was sick. My dad was taking care of her at the hospital, and I was going to be spending Thanksgiving alone that year. I was 15 at that time, so with no one to spend the majority of the holiday with until my dad got home, I prepared a small dinner. Just turkey breast, mashed potatoes, and a few of the usual comfort foods like chips and other junk foods. It was quiet outside, and the whole neighborhood practically empty since most people were with their families. Right around 6:30 p.m., when I finally got everything in the oven, I heard a knock coming from the front door. Not a normal knock either. 3 quick taps, a pause, and then one more. Almost sounded rehearsed, if you get what I mean. I froze because I wasn't expecting anyone. I thought maybe a delivery driver dropped something off. But when I checked the peephole, a man was standing there. He looked like he was in his mid-40s, wearing a dark jacket and a knit beanie. He wasn't carrying a package, wasn't holding anything at all. He was just standing there with his hands in his pockets and staring at my door like he was listening for me. I didn't open it. I just said through the door, can I help you?" He didn't answer at first. He stepped closer and then tilted his head slightly, like he was trying to line his eye up with the peephole. I jumped back because he got way too close. And then he spoke, soft, polite, almost sounded rehearsed. He said, "Sorry to bother you. Do you have any leftovers?" I thought I misheard him. "Leftovers? It's not even dinner time yet." He didn't laugh or clarify. He said, "I haven't eaten. It's Thanksgiving. I was hoping someone could spare a plate." Something about the way he said it felt off. People in need don't usually go door to door after dark in the suburbs, and they definitely don't try to peer into your house while asking. I told him, "I'm sorry, I can't help." And then I backed away from the door. He didn't leave. He knocked again, but harder this time. "You sure you don't have anything in there?" he asked, voice suddenly lower and less polite. I didn't answer. I just dialed my dad and then I whispered that someone was at the door being weird. My dad told me to lock everything and then wait while he called one of our neighbors who lived a few houses down. And while I was on the phone, the man started trying the doorknob. Not violently though, slowly, like he thought maybe he could sneak it open if he was patient enough. I whispered, "He's trying to get in, Dad. He's trying the door." And my dad told me to grab the biggest kitchen knife that I could and stay upstairs in my room. I crept halfway up the stairs before the knocking turned into a full-on pounding. As I passed the front door, I could hear his frantic voice. He kept repeating the same sentence over and over, saying, "Just a plate," almost chanting it. When the neighbor finally walked over, I could hear him shouting from outside, asking what was going on. The man immediately stopped pounding, but I didn't hear him walk away. No footsteps, no gate opening, nothing. It was silent. Too silent. My neighbor knocked and asked if I was okay. I peeked out the upstairs window, and that's when I saw the man. He was standing at the side of my house, halfway hidden behind the corner of the wall, like he just slid over there when the neighbor came. He wasn't looking at the neighbor. He was staring up at me, directly at my window. His hands were still in his pockets, but I could see his shoulders rise and fall like he was breathing too fast. My neighbor must have noticed something since I didn't come to the door and could assumingly hear the man breathing hard, because then he turned to the corner of the house and spotted the guy. When he shouted at him, the man finally bolted, just sprinted down the street, and then disappeared into the dark. The police were called. Reports were filed, the usual thing. But they never found the man. No one else in the neighborhood got a knock like that. They checked shelters, asked around, but nothing. Here's the part that bothers me the most. When my dad got home later that night, he found footprints in the soft dirt along the side of the house, leading from my backyard heading to my front door. The guy hadn't come from the street. He'd been behind my house first, watching and waiting. I still lock every door and window hours before sunset now. And this Thanksgiving, I'm going to my sister's place. I don't care if I have to take a 3-hour flight to get there. Because every time that I think about that night, I keep coming back to one thought that I just can't get rid of. He didn't want food. He wanted to see who would open the door. I was on the highway with my husband and our daughter, driving to my aunt's house for Thanksgiving. It was still early in the afternoon, but the sky looked heavy and gray, the kind that makes everything feel quieter than usual. The road stretched out in front of us with long empty patches, and the radio signal kept cutting out every few minutes. We were about an hour away from my aunt's place when the car started making a strange grinding sound. It was soft at first, almost easy to ignore, but then the whole car gave a sudden jerk that made my stomach tighten. My husband pulled over to the shoulder as the engine began to sputter like it was choking on air. When we finally rolled to a full stop, the car trembled once more and then died. He tried to turn it back on, but the only sound was a dry clicking that made it obvious that the car was not going anywhere. I remember feeling this slow wave of dread settle in my chest, not a dramatic panic, just that cold practical awareness that we were stuck on a long, mostly empty road on a holiday when half of the world wasn't even working. We called roadside assistance and we were told that someone could get to us, but that it would take 40 minutes. That didn't sound too bad, but the temperature was dropping fast and the wind coming off the open road was sharp. Cars passed by, but not that many, and each one shook our car slightly as it went. Our daughter kept rubbing her hands together, and I could feel my own fingers getting stiff from the cold. I tried to stay calm by focusing on the fact that help was on the way. After about 15 minutes, a pickup truck slowed down in front of us. It was old, the kind with faded paint that used to be red, but now looked almost brown. The windows were muddy too, and the brake lights flickered unevenly, like they had trouble staying on. The truck pulled onto the shoulder a few yards ahead of us and then rolled to a stop. At first, I felt relieved. It was hard not to feel grateful when someone actually stopped on the road like that. But then the driver got out. He moved slowly, like every step required thought. I noticed that he was tall, maybe in his late 40s or 50s, with a heavy coat that looked dirty in a way that wasn't just from work. His boots left dark prints on the gravel, and he kept one hand in his pocket as he walked. There was something in the way he looked at our car that made my stomach turn. It wasn't concern, it was more like he was assessing something. He came right up to the passenger side window, and my husband cracked it open only an inch. From where I sat, I could see the man's eyes moving over the inside of our car, pausing on my daughter in the back seat. He didn't smile. He didn't look surprised or friendly. His expression was flat, almost blank, like he was studying something that he didn't care about. He asked if we needed help. He didn't sound annoyed or cheerful, just strangely calm. My husband told him that we had roadside assistance coming, but the man didn't seem happy about that. He started asking questions, first normal ones about the car, but then he moved on to things that had nothing to do with the situation. He asked where we were heading, whether we had family nearby, how long we'd been driving, whether we lived close to here or far away. I remember the way he asked it too. It was slow, like he was trying to memorize every detail. He kept shifting his weight back and forth, and his boots scraped the gravel every time that he moved. At one point, he leaned down closer to the window, and I instinctively pulled my daughter closer to me, even though she was already strapped into her seat. He didn't seem cold at all, even though the wind was blowing hard. His breath didn't shake and his hands didn't tremble. He just kept studying us. And then he told us that it wasn't safe to stay in the car with the cold dropping like it was. He said that we should get into his truck to stay warm. He didn't offer a blanket, he didn't offer tools, he just kept insisting that we get out of the car. He gestured to the truck behind him like it was some kind of obvious solution. The inside of it was dark from where I sat, and I couldn't see anything past the passenger seat, and not even the shape of it. I felt my chest tighten, as something about the idea of leaving our locked car to get inside a stranger's dark truck made my skin crawl. My husband thanked him, but told him that we were fine waiting. But the man kept standing there. He didn't leave, he didn't shrug and walk away. He just stood still, staring through the crack in the window, like he was waiting for one of us to change our mind. Minutes passed, though it felt longer. My ears were ringing from how hard I was trying to listen to the road behind us, hoping to hear the tow truck. The stranger kept asking the same questions, like he thought that he would get different answers the second time. The whole time his eyes kept drifting back to my daughter. Each time he stared a little longer. He kept asking us to go into his car, trying to convince us that it was the better solution, and each time that we said no, he got more agitated. But then, finally, I saw headlights much farther down the road, approaching slowly in the right lane. It looked like a tow truck, the bright top lights bouncing slightly on the uneven highway surface. And the man noticed it too. And as soon as he saw it, his expression changed. It wasn't relief or disappointment. It was something darker, almost frustrated. He stepped back from our car and looked at the tow truck again. And without saying anything, he turned toward his own truck. But instead of driving off, he walked around the front of it and then headed straight for the tree line a few yards off the shoulder. He didn't say anything. He didn't look back. He just disappeared into the woods like he knew exactly where he was going. My husband and I sat frozen, watching the place where he had vanished. The tow truck pulled up behind us, and the driver stepped out friendly and casual, like nothing strange had happened at all. He asked what was wrong with the car. He didn't see the man. He didn't see anyone walking away. It was like the stranger had dissolved into the trees. The tow truck driver fixed our car enough for us to follow him to a shop in the next town. And the whole time that we were driving, I kept looking in the side mirror, expecting that old pickup truck to appear behind us. But it never did. Long story short, we got to my aunt's house later than planned. I didn't tell the whole story until the next day because I didn't want to ruin Thanksgiving dinner. Even now, every year around the holiday, I think about that man stepping into the woods without a word. I think about how he kept telling us to go into his truck, and I think about how fast he changed once he realized that someone else was coming. I don't know what he wanted, but I know for a fact it wasn't to help. And when I picture his face through that cracked window, I feel grateful for every cold minute that we spent waiting in our own locked car. I went to the store the night before Thanksgiving because I had forgotten chicken broth and onions, two things that somehow feel impossible to skip. The store was crowded in that tired, desperate holiday way, with people pushing carts like they were on autopilot. I grabbed a basket and I went straight to the produce section. And that's where I first saw him. He stood between the potatoes and the green beans, not picking anything up, just watching people move around him. I noticed him because he didn't have a cart or a basket. He looked like he had just walked in off the street. He had this thin jacket, jeans a little too long, hands shoved deep into his pockets. I only glanced at him for a second before looking away, and nothing seemed too strange yet. But then, I walked to the baking aisle, and he was suddenly there again. Same posture, same stare. It wasn't the kind of stare where someone accidentally looks too long. It was focused, like his eyes were following me as I grabbed the sugar. I told myself that I was imagining things. Stores are busy on holidays, and people cross paths. I then went to the canned goods, and there he was, standing at the end of the aisle, not even pretending to shop. His head was tilted slightly, his eyes locked on me like he was waiting for something. My chest tightened, but I kept moving. I didn't want to panic over nothing. I took a different route to the dairy section to shake the feeling, and he was already there. This time, he was closer, maybe 10 feet away. He still had no cart and no items in his hands, and there was no expression on his face. The fluorescent lights above made his skin look gray and flat, almost sickly, and I could hear the hum of the freezers and the sound of a kid crying somewhere behind me. But he was just completely still. When I turned to leave, I heard footsteps fall into place behind me, not fast, not loud, but timed with mine. I didn't look back. I just headed straight for the self-checkout, scanning my items as fast as I could, and my hands were shaking so badly that I dropped the onions twice. I then rushed out into the parking lot, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. I didn't see him behind me anymore, and for a moment, I felt kind of stupid for being scared. I told myself that it was just nerves and stress or coincidence. You know, that holiday stress we get? I then loaded the bags into my back seat, got in, locked the doors, and I sat for a second to breathe. And then my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me reacted before I could think, and then I answered. I didn't hear background noise, just breathing. I felt my entire body go cold, and I didn't say anything, and then I heard a voice whisper. It described my jacket, the exact color of it. He described the little stain on my right sleeve that I hadn't even noticed. He described the braid in my hair and the scuff mark on my shoe. Every detail was something that I hadn't shared with anyone, and something he could only see if he had been standing right next to me. He then whispered that he enjoyed shopping together, and then he hung up. I did not go back to that store for 3 months, and even now, every time that I'm in a crowded aisle and someone walks behind me, I swear I can feel that same stare on the back of my neck. I don't know how he got my number. I don't know how this thing happened to me and why it did. But all I know is, to the man who stalked me while I was shopping for Thanksgiving things, I hope that I never see you again. I hadn't seen my Uncle Dan in almost 12 years before that Thanksgiving. For most of my life, he was just a name that people mentioned in passing, the relative who lived somewhere out west, always with vague explanations about why he never visited. My mom never said anything bad about him directly, but any time that his name came up, she would change the subject in a soft but firm way that made it clear that she didn't want to talk about him. So, when he suddenly showed up at my parents' house that Thanksgiving, it felt strange right from the start. He walked in with this huge smile like he'd been part of every holiday all along and that nothing had changed. He hugged everyone too tightly, like he was trying to make up for years in a single gesture. I remember thinking that he looked older than I expected, and not just regular aging, but that worn-out look people get after long stretches of stress. His hair was messy, and he had deep shadows under his eyes, the kind that don't go away with sleep. Still, he acted friendly and cheerful. He complimented everything in the house, laughed loudly at things that weren't really that funny, and touched people's backs and shoulders more than normal. Most of us didn't know him well enough to say anything, so we all just pretended that it was fine. It wasn't fine. The first thing that felt off was how he moved around the house. He didn't sit with everyone else or join in on anything for long. He wandered. He drifted from room to room with this slow searching pace, like he was looking for something specific, but didn't want to seem obvious about it. Every time that I turned around, he was somewhere different, standing in the hallway watching people, hovering by the kitchen doorway, walking past the guest rooms even though no one was in them. At one point, I went upstairs to help my mom make the beds for my cousins who were staying the night there, and while we were working, I heard soft footsteps on the carpeted hallway outside. When I stepped out, he was standing there, not doing anything, just staring at the slightly open door like he had been listening. And when he saw me, he gave this slow smile, too slow, like he had forgotten how to do it naturally, and then he walked off without saying anything. Later in that day, I noticed that he kept trying to ask everyone questions that felt too personal. He wanted to know where each of us lived, how far away it was, who we lived with, whether we lived alone, what floor our apartments were on. He asked about our routines, our work hours, what days we stayed home, and he asked what kind of locks we had, what kind of neighborhoods we lived in. He didn't write anything down, but I could tell that he was trying to remember it. He spent a lot of time around the kids too, my cousin's kids, all under 10. He didn't play with them, he didn't talk to them, he just watched them. There was one moment when my cousin's youngest fell asleep on the couch after dinner, and I saw Uncle Dan standing near the wall behind him. He was not close enough to be noticed, but close enough to stare. He wasn't looking at the TV or anyone else, just the sleeping child. His face didn't show anything. There was no smile, no warmth, no nothing. Just that same blank stare. When he realized that I was watching him, he shifted his eyes to me without moving his head, and it made my chest feel tight because it was such a cold, empty look, like he was annoyed that I had noticed. As the night went on, he became even stranger. His cheerful act faded, and his face settled into this unsettling calm. Every once in a while, I found him standing in the shadows of the doorways, watching people pass by without saying anything. He walked around the house like he knew it better than he should after 12 years away. He kept looking at windows, locks, the sliding door, the back porch steps. My husband later told me that when he went outside to bring in firewood, he found Dan standing in the dark yard, staring at the house with his hands in his pockets. He didn't seem to notice the cold or the fact that he was standing in the wet leaves. He was just looking at the house like he was studying it. The last thing that pushed everything over the edge happened after most of the guests had left. My parents always let a few people stay the night. I went upstairs to grab some extra blankets, and I saw Uncle Dan standing at the top of the stairs, motionless, with his head slightly tilted, as if he was listening for something. He didn't react when I walked around him. He just continued standing there, breathing slowly, his eyes following me but his body not moving at all. That night, my mom quietly pulled me aside in the kitchen. She didn't say much, just reminded me to lock our bedroom door. I could tell by her face that she was scared. She knew something was wrong with him. Maybe she had always known. Early the next morning, before most of us were awake, he was gone. No goodbye, no note, nothing. He just vanished. My dad said he checked the guest room and the bed didn't look slept in. He had taken his jacket, but he left behind a cup of water that had barely been touched. For weeks after that, a few of us swore we saw someone who looked like him sitting in the random parking lots near our houses or standing far down our streets at night, too far to be sure. Maybe it was just our imagination. Maybe it was someone else. I honestly don't know. All I do know is that something was deeply wrong with him, something that didn't show on the surface right away, but became clearer and clearer the longer that he was at the house. I still think about the way he studied everything, asked about our routines, our locks, the kids, everything. The way he moved around quietly, always just out of view. Nothing has happened yet, but I have a sinking feeling that something might happen, and it will be because of him. Sometimes, when I wake up at night for no reason, I get this chill down my spine, thinking about Uncle Dan. So, Uncle Dan, I don't know what you're up to and what your plan is or what is wrong with you, but I hope that we never meet again. I wasn't planning on sharing this, but the closer it gets to Thanksgiving this year, the more the memory keeps circling back. Maybe writing it out will help me move past it. Last Thanksgiving, my family did something different. Instead of a big dinner, we decided to volunteer at a community center earlier in the day, and then just have a small meal at home at night. By the time that we got back, we were exhausted, and honestly, a little drained from dealing with the crowds. At around 9 p.m., I stepped outside to throw some trash away, turkey packaging, vegetable scraps, that kind of stuff. It was cold enough that you could see your breath, and the whole neighborhood was quiet. Most of the houses were dark except for a few porch lights. As I was dragging the garbage bag to the end of the driveway, I noticed a car that I didn't recognize parked across the street. The engine was off, no lights, and at first I thought it was just a guest visiting one of my neighbors. But then I saw someone sitting in the driver's seat. They weren't doing anything. No phone glow, no radio, no movement, just staring straight ahead with their hands on the wheel. And even from across the street, I got this deep, instinctive feeling that they were watching me without turning their head. I know, that sounds weird, but that's how I felt and how I would describe it. I tried to play it off though. I just tied the bag, walked back inside, locked the door, and told myself that it was nothing. After a couple of minutes later, I checked the peephole, and the car was still there. The person inside was now turned slightly toward my house. I told my mom, who shrugged it off and said that it was probably someone waiting to sober up after a drunken Thanksgiving dinner. I wanted to believe her, so I went back to ignoring it. At around 10 p.m., we were cleaning up the last of the dishes, and my mom had gone upstairs to shower. I had walked into the living room to check on the front windows again, and the car was gone. I felt relieved, like maybe I was just worried for nothing. But then, someone knocked. 3 slow, heavy knocks on our front door. I froze. It was too late for guests, and all of our neighbors were busy with their own families. I didn't move or say anything, hoping that they think no one was home. And then they knocked again, slower this time. I crept to the peephole and then looked out. No one was there. But the porch light was shining on fresh footprints in the frost on our steps. Not shoe prints. Sock prints is what it looked like someone had walked barefoot except for a thin layer of fabric. I backed away from the door and I reached for my phone, and before I could call anyone, another knock came. But this one was from the side door, the one that leads straight into our laundry room. That door has no peephole. I heard the handle jiggle, and then the tapping started. Not knocking, tapping. Like someone running their finger along the door panel in a slow, lazy click. I called my mom, whispering that someone was trying to get in, and by the time that she ran downstairs, the noises had stopped. When we checked the backyard from our kitchen window, that same car from earlier was idling behind our fence gate, engine on this time, and the exhaust steaming into the cold air. Someone was now standing next to it. They weren't moving toward the house. They weren't breaking in. They were just standing there, facing our window like they were waiting for us to look out and see them. We called the police, and the second that we turned on the back porch light, the person got into the car and drove away without headlights. The officers took our statements, but said that unless we had more evidence that the person tried to enter the home, there really wasn't much that they could do. They did patrol for a while, but they never found the vehicle. Here's the part that I didn't tell the officers because I forgot about it until later. Remember the sock prints on the front steps? They were tiny, like a child's, but the person standing by the car, definitely an adult. So I don't know who knocked on our door that night or who was watching the house. But every Thanksgiving, I checked the windows more times than I'd like to admit, because sometimes I think the knocking wasn't really the point. I think it was a test or something. I think they wanted to see what we would do when someone tried to get in. What would it take for us to call the police? And most importantly, what doors we kept locked and how long it would take us to get to them. Of course, all of this are just my assumptions. I have no proof, and honestly, I don't want to know more. But if you have any opinions about the situation, please, I would really appreciate it if you could let me know. And thank you for reading my story. And here's the riddle for this video. Hey everyone, this is your creepy sister. Thank you so much for watching the video. I do hope you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to leave a like and a comment. It really helps the channel out. A big shout out to both my channel members and Patreon members. Thank you so much for taking your support to the next level. You guys are great. And again, to everyone, stay scared because your fear feeds me.